In the heart of a bustling city, there stood a time-worn edifice known as St. Joseph Hospital, an institution dating back to the 1970s. Within its aging walls worked a beacon of compassion and kindness. A 28-year-old nurse named Linda. Her days were filled with the routine tasks of a medical caregiver, tending to the needs of patients with a smile that could light up even the gloomiest of rooms. Linda was no stranger to the hospital environment. St. Joseph was her second home, her second job, a place where she was known for her amiable nature and unwavering dedication. Yet, beneath the ordinary bustle of hospital life, something far from ordinary was beginning to stir. One fateful night, while the rest of the city was ensnared in dreams, Linda found herself facing an inexplicable encounter. As she moved through the dimly lit corridors, performing her usual rounds, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sterile coolness of the hospital. An eerie sensation enveloped her, a sense that she was not alone. At first she attributed it to the long hours and the strain of her work. After all, hospitals at night are a different realm altogether, where shadows dance and the silence sings. She told herself that it was nothing more than her tired mind playing tricks on her, that the flicker of movement in the corner of her eye was just a trick of the light. Yet, as the nights wore on, the strange occurrences didn't cease. Uncanny whispers at the edge of hearing, fleeting shapes in the periphery of her vision, a presence that seemed to linger just out of sight. It was as if the hospital itself was coming alive, breathing life into her growing fears. But Linda, ever the rational one, chose to dismiss these experiences. She convinced herself it was the result of fatigue, the stress of her demanding job. After all, she reasoned, there was always a logical explanation for everything, right? And so Linda decided to dismiss the strange occurrences as mere figments of her tired mind. As time passed, the unusual events started to escalate in intensity. What began as fleeting glimpses in the corner of her eye soon morphed into full-blown apparitions, as if the hospital's antiquated walls were bleeding spectres into existence. Linda, though a woman of courage and faith, found herself increasingly unsettled by these phantasmal encounters. Her work shifts became a dance with the uncanny, an eerie ballet that found her nursing not only the living but seemingly the dead. The air seemed to throb with a spectral chill, and shadows seemed to twist into grotesque forms. Linda felt as though she was being watched, the unseen eyes of the hospital's past patients lingering on her. Hoping to find solace in conversation, Linda considered sharing her experiences with her colleagues. She imagined their reactions, incredulous laughter, dismissive shrugs, perhaps even accusations of madness. Instead, she chose silence, burying her fears deep within the confines of her heart. As days turned into weeks, the haunting did not confine itself to the hospital. It followed her home like a shadow. The lines between her work and personal life blurred as her nightmares spilled over into her waking hours. In her home, once a sanctuary, she began to see fleeting apparitions and hear disembodied whispers. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Linda decided to take leave from work. She hoped the absence from the haunted halls of St. Joseph's would offer her respite. But the paranormal had a cruel sense of humor. The nightmares didn't just persist, they intensified. Each night, she found herself trapped in a theater of horror, her dreams a relentless replay of spectral sightings and phantom whispers. Her husband, Mark, dismissed her experiences as the result of stress and fatigue. He couldn't see the dread that gripped Linda, the fear that had sunk its claws deep into her soul. She was alone, caught in a tempest of terror that seemed to have no end. Despite her best efforts, the nightmares continued, following her into the safe confines of her home. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind seemed to echo with the haunting whispers of St. Joseph's Hospital. Upon returning to work, Linda was confronted with an event that shook her to her core. A seemingly regular night shift unfolded into an eerie tale that she was not prepared for. As the clock struck midnight, a figure appeared before her, presumed to be Dr. Willie. He asked her to check on a patient named Mary in room 47. Obliging dutifully, Linda went to the room and found Mary a seemingly ordinary patient. The following morning, Linda decided to update Dr. Willie about Mary's condition. Dr. Willie, however, looked puzzled. "But I didn't ask you to check on any patient last night, Linda," he claimed. "And there's no patient named Mary in room 47. Linda, taken aback by his response, insisted she was asked to check on Mary. She led Dr. Willie to room 47, only to find it locked and deserted. The room was in a state of disrepair, with broken windows and leaking pipes. It was apparent that no one had been in there, let alone a patient named Mary. The realization was a punch to Linda's gut. She felt her knees buckle as the room spun around her. She clung onto Dr. Willie for support, her eyes wide with fear. "But I saw her. I spoke to her," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Willie, concerned yet confused, tried to comfort her, but Linda was far from reassured. The argument with Dr. Willie was a blur. Linda could only remember the cold dread that set in her heart. The face of the patient, Mary, was etched in her mind. She couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, followed even. The hospital corridors, once familiar and comforting, now seemed ominously eerie. Every shadow, every noise made her heart race. Now, Linda was faced with a chilling question. If Dr. Willie didn't send her to room 47, then who did? The absurdity of the situation was terrifying. It was as if reality and nightmare had blurred into one, leaving Linda caught in the middle of a chilling enigma. Linda's life took a dark turn following the incident at the hospital. Her once vibrant spirit was now overshadowed by an eerie gloom. She was no longer the same cheerful woman who used to walk the halls of St. Joseph, healing the sick and comforting the distressed. A supernatural entity had taken hold of her, turning her life into a relentless nightmare. Her health began to decline rapidly. She was plagued with a constant fatigue that no amount of rest could cure. Her eyes, once full of life, now seemed dull and distant. Her laughter, once infectious, was replaced by an unsettling silence. She was a shadow of her former self, trapped in a body that was slowly succumbing to an unseen force. Her behavior grew increasingly peculiar. She would often be found laughing one moment and crying the next, as if stuck in an emotional roller coaster she couldn't escape. Her words would sometimes make no sense, as if she was speaking in a language all her own. It was as if Linda was there, but not quite. In a desperate bid to free Linda from this torment, priests were summoned to perform an exorcism. The holy men prayed fervently, their voices echoing in the once serene hospital, but their efforts were in vain. The entity that held Linda in its grip was relentless. It refused to let go. 15 exorcisms were performed, each one more intense than the last, but none could free Linda from her unseen tormentor. This struggle with the supernatural entity continued for 2 relentless years. Linda, once a beacon of joy and kindness, was now a shell of her former self. The entity had drained her of her vitality, her happiness, and ultimately, her life. Despite the relentless efforts to save her, Linda was claimed by the very entity she tried to escape. Her story serves as a chilling reminder of the unseen forces that may lurk in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Linda's tragic end left more questions than answers. The threads of her story, woven with the uncanny and the unexplained, remain a tangled mystery that time has yet to unravel. Linda, the compassionate nurse of St. Joseph Hospital, was plagued by eerie occurrences that defied reason. Haunted by an unseen patient, tormented by relentless nightmares, and driven to the brink of sanity, her tale is one that chills the spine and stirs the mind. The hospital, a relic of the 70s, bore silent witness to Linda's ordeal. Its aging walls echoed with her fear, its dimly lit corridors magnified her dread. The room number 47, a room that was supposedly vacant and run down, became a chilling symbol of the inexplicable. Who was the elusive Mary that Linda was asked to check? Was it a figment of her imagination or a spectral presence that lurked in the shadows? The questions are abundant, but the answers are scant. The tragedy of Linda's story is not only the horror that she endured, but also the disbelief she encountered. Her pleas for understanding were met with dismissive shrugs and skeptical smiles. Her reports of the supernatural dismissed as the ramblings of an overtired mind. Yet what she experienced was real to her. As real as the hospital's cold, sterile walls and the relentless ticking of the clock in the silent night. Her story left an indelible mark on those who knew her. The hospital staff, who once dismissed her fears, were left with a haunting memory that cast a long dark shadow over their everyday routines. The hospital itself seemed to change, its once familiar corners now tinged with an eerie sense of unease. And so, the haunting mystery of St. Joseph Hospital remains, leaving us to wonder what truly lurks within its aging walls. Linda's story, unresolved and eerie, continues to echo through the corridors, reminding us of the inexplicable mysteries that sometimes lie hidden in the most ordinary of places.